My name is Eric and welcome to another episode of Dataful. I present awesome cases from some of the best data scientists and machine learning engineers in the world and discuss recent topics on AI. Today I would love to talk about the open letter demanding to stop giant AI experiments. The letter has caused quite a stir in social media and in the news. The letter has been signed by a range of AI experts, including Joshua Bengio and Stuart Russell, renowned people like the 2020 presidential candidate Andrew Yang, and a range of tech leaders, including Elon Musk, the founders of Skype, Pinterest, the CEO of Conjure, and many, many more. But the letter has also gotten a lot of criticism. Criticism for some of the individuals backing the letter, like Elon Musk, criticism for the true motivation of some of the signatories, and criticism for demanding to stop AI development, which many believe is unfeasible. And yet, many comments I read online agree with the letter's other key points, demanding that we need more AI regulation, oversight, provenance, and the coping mechanisms to deal with potential dramatic economic and political disruptions. Today, I'm therefore reviewing comments made by 7 AI experts in direct response to the letter. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to support my work. I want to talk for a second about what my takeaway is of this debate. First of all, I think it is absolutely fascinating and in everyone's interest that we can so openly discuss the future of AI, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, thinking this might be AI hype or we should be super concerned about machines taking over the world. Secondly, I would say that the majority of people think that we need some form of regulation or governance of AI systems and future versions thereof. Thirdly, I can't shake off the feeling that many people are waiting for somebody or something to step in and taking over this governing role. For many people, this could be, for example, the government, but you could also think of a consortium of companies and institutions taking over that governing role. So far, we have only seen very little motion in that regard, and the most promising thing is actually the European Artificial Intelligence Act, which is currently in proposal form. And my last point is that no matter if you think that this letter is completely justified or overblown and alarmist when it comes to AI, it had already its effect, and that is that people talk about that issue and raise awareness. And there can be nothing greater than people talking about something and creating awareness. The first comment is from Sebastian Raschka, who is an ML and AI researcher. He's a lead educator at Lightning AI and an open source contributor. He's probably most famous for his book Machine Learning with PyTorch and Scikit-learn. In response to the letter, Sebastian Raschka asks the question, profits or ethics? Sebastian then continues and says, while the idea of pausing AI experimentation may seem like a plausible harm reduction strategy, the context behind the open letter raises some questions. First, and perhaps most tellingly, some of the letter's most prominent signatories represent tech companies that have fallen behind the curve. The call for a pause reads more as an attempt to buy time. So essentially, he doubts the signatories' true motivation and says they probably just want to buy time. He then poses the question, what if the letter had originators from a different group, such as concerned educators like himself? He says educators are in the classroom at the front lines of navigating this new frontier, which is introduced to tools like ChatGPT and the like. He says the educators are then also the one to gain the most from a pause in AI experimentation, as it would help them then to make sure that their students are the best equipped to navigate an AI-driven world. He finished this comment with saying that many tech companies, universities, and independent bodies have already established their own ethical guidelines for AI development. He then also continues saying that some of those teams have unfortunately also been dissolved by the very institution that set them up in the first place. And we will hear a few more examples about this later. So in summary, Sebastian questions some of the signatories' true motivation as they come from competitors that have been fallen behind. He wished that this letter came from actually more true concerned educators and would have been a bit bigger and more powerful technique. And at the end, he remarks that we may have already all these AI ethical guidelines. However, some of the teams don't exist anymore in the companies that created those. The next comment comes from Rachel Stockton, who is actually also a signatory of the letter. She has an LLM from Georgetown and worked for companies like Meta and McKinsey. She's currently the chief of staff at Conjecture, an AI research institute dealing with alignment. Alignment is a very topic that deals with making sure ever so powerful AI systems comply with the social and ethical norms of society. She starts with saying that history of AI gets written from years from now, but today might be one of these pivotal moments, where thousands of voices mobilize in a joint effort to pause a dangerous trajectory towards human competitive intelligence. She also says that the letter asks all the important questions. She finishes her comment saying, think about all the CEOs and senior leadership that aren't represented on the letters. Those are the ones that are playing roulette with humanity's future. The next comment is from Andrew NG, which many of you have probably heard of before. He's a founder and CEO of Landing AI. He's a founder of Deep Learning AI and co-founded the Google Brain Project. He's a co-chairman and co-founder of Coursera, an adjunct professor at Stanford. Many consider him the godfather of deep learning, and Times considered him one of the most 100 influential people. Given his accolade, his response is probably the most disappointing one. Hear me out. He starts with saying that a 6-month moratorium is just a terrible idea, which is a blunt statement. He then gives kind of like a boilerplate technologist argument saying, oh, there will be so many new applications in education, healthcare, and food that will help so many people. But he also weighs in that we should probably balance the value of AI versus the risks. He then explains why the 6-month moratorium would be such a bad idea, because he said it could only happen if government steps in. But then governments pausing emerging technologies is just anti-competitive, terrible precedents, and awful innovation policies. So in general, the way I read this, he's saying anything government could do is just terrible. He then just repeats an earlier comment saying, oh, AI is important, but it probably also has risks. And takes now a jab at media, saying that popular press has a narrative that AI companies are running amok, shipping unsafe code, and that's just simply not true. The vast majority of AI teams take responsible AI and safety seriously. While I personally think the media has also quite a lot of positive things to say about OpenAI, I think Andrew is referring here to multiple articles that showed up in the New York Times, and one article in particular in the Time magazine demanding that the letter is not going far enough, by a gentleman called Elizio Rutkowski. He makes some pretty crass statements in this letter, saying we should probably even be able to nuke data centers in the future to stop AI. And this brings us to the last part of his comment, which I personally think is the most productive one. He kind of says that 6 months moratorium is simply not practical, which I also agree with. And he then says we absolutely need more advances in AI safety, regulations around transparency, and auditing. In my opinion, he could have just posted this very last part of the paragraph and it would have been a great comment. The next comment is from Gary Marcus. Gary is a professor emeritus of psychology and neuroscience at NYU. He's the founder of a machine learning company called Geometric Intelligence that was later acquired by Uber, where he also then was a director of AI. And he's a prolific author, having published many books on the human mind and artificial intelligence. His latest book is called Rebooting AI, Building Artificial Intelligence We Can Trust. Gary Marcus is a signatory of the letter and actually has gotten a lot of personal criticism also supporting this letter. He provides a longer response on Twitter, which he summarizes here in his Substack. He starts with saying that a lot of the attacks on the letter focused on who sponsors it, not who signed it. And he then says that the letter should be judged by what it says and not who wrote it. He continues saying that it's perfectly fine to propose a different alternative, but most of the critiques of the letter have not. He also says that even OpenAI has acknowledged that there are serious risks for AI and we need to do something about it. He also says what the letter doesn't do. The letter doesn't call for a ban of AI, it's a moratorium. It doesn't call for a permanent ban, and it also does not call for a ban on GPT-4. In the very last part of his commentary, he actually comments on the fact that he does not think too highly of large language models like ChatGPT because they are unreliable, and he doesn't think they are actually a good basis for factuality. In fact, he doesn't even think that they are anywhere close to AGI, artificial general intelligence. And then he says something that really stuck with me. Just because something is not artificial general intelligence, it might still have the potential to rip apart our social fabric. A lot of the discussion has been centered around, is this artificial intelligence or is this artificial general intelligence, a much, much stronger version of AI? And he says it doesn't really matter if at the end of the day it still has a tremendous impact on society. And I totally agree with him here on this one. The next comment is from Joanna Bryson. She's a professor of ethics and technology and a founding member of the digital governance department at the Berlin Hertie School. She writes repeatedly for magazines like Wired, and one of her latest articles is called "One Day AI Will Seem as Human as Anyone, What Then?" Joanna starts saying that the moratorium asking for a slowdown of AI is libertarian, meaning those are people that are not interested in working with the government. If they had true interest in support for governance and appropriate pacing of the industry, they would indeed work with the government, like she and many of her followers do. Joanna then suggests that the signatories could actually throw their weight behind efforts such as the EU's Digital Service Act, some of you might actually know GDPR, or the forthcoming Artificial Intelligence Act. In particular, the Artificial Intelligence Act is quite interesting. It would be the first law on AI, and it would classify AI into 3 risk categories: unacceptable risk category, high risk applications, and essentially applications that would not need any banning. She also said that companies could already demonstrate compliance right now by showing actually that they implement regulations for DevOps, demonstrate auditability and transparency on AI. Lastly, she says that the governments actually need to recognize tech giants for what they are, utilities, and for that reason also apply appropriate scale of regulation to them, which would obviously also affect artificial intelligence. In summary, Joanna says that there's actual governmental efforts already underway, and some signatories of this letter should put more weight behind those efforts. Secondly, the company should also demonstrate more openness when it comes to their own artificial intelligence efforts in terms of auditability and transparency. And lastly, she says the governments need to start changing its view on tech giants, which operate a lot of these AI systems, and start treating them more like utility companies that are obviously regulated nowadays. Another comment comes from Marc Rotenberg, who is a professor of law at Georgetown and the founder of the Center for AI and Digital Policy. This is an independent non-for-profit research organization that aims to ensure that artificial intelligence and digital policies promote a better society, more fair, more just, and more accountable. Marc says that one thing that's really important to him from the letter is that AI developers must work with policymakers to dramatically accelerate the development of robust AI governance systems. He also then says that there are already many guidelines in place. He gives examples: the Universal Guidelines for AI, the OECD G20 AI Principles, the UNESCO Recommendation on AI Ethics, the EU AI Act, which we just talked about, the Council of Europe AI Treaty, and the OSTB AI Bill of Rights. He then doubles down and says that the AI research community needs to be aware that there are already robust governance frameworks for AI. There is a lot of work ahead for implementation. And the last comment I wanted to discuss with you is by Emily M. Bender, professor of linguistics and the director of the Computational Linguistics Laboratory at the University of Washington. She's probably most famous for her paper called "On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots: Can Large Language Models Be Too Big?" She co-authored this paper with Tim Gibru, the AI ethicist who got fired in 2021 from Google's AI team after refusing to retract this paper. Emily's main point about the open letter is that it's just another drop in the bucket of AI hype, and this letter is largely overstating the capabilities of LLMs. Just as a general comment, I find her response to the letter quite snarky written. It unfortunately takes a little bit away from the actual really good points that Emily makes. So her main criticism about the letter is actually that the letter is just dripping with AI hype. So she thinks this is an overblown discussion about the capabilities of AI. In particular, she has a problem with the very first sentence in the letter that starts with AI systems with human competitive intelligence. And we talked about human competitive intelligence a little bit before. She refutes that large language models are actually human competitive intelligence engines. And in fact, they're just large language models, and no one is developing a digital mind. She also continues to say that the tests that are being performed abundantly in the research papers published by Microsoft and ChatGPT are not particularly useful to test for human competitive intelligence. She says what we're seeing here is rather a headlong rush to ever larger language models without considering risks was a bad thing. She also said that the risk is not too powerful of an AI. Instead, she says the actual risk is the concentration of power in hands of people, too few people actually, and new systems of oppression being created, and also major damage to our information ecosystem being produced, as well as to our natural ecosystem through the usage of energy resources. After criticizing the letter abundantly, she actually says that some of these policy goals indeed make sense, and she indeed agrees with that provenance and watermarking systems are absolutely necessary for AI systems. So what that means is we really want to be able to attribute content generated by these systems back to an AI system. She also says that liability is important, which is just another word for saying governance is required. She also in general has a problem with always people blaming AI essentially for the harm they potentially cause, because she says it's people who decide how to deploy these things. And she definitely has a fair point here. She also says at the end of the day, this AI development is driven by corporations and VCs looking to make the most money. And we shouldn't be taken away by tech bros saying, oh no, we're building something too powerful. It's pretty clear that Emily thinks that AI is heavily overhyped, including by this open letter. And instead of regulating AI, we should actually regulate the corporations and the VCs that try to push these systems into the market, while at the same time hyping up the market about its own dangers. I want to leave you with the response from CEO Sam Altman to the letter, who says in his third and second point that we need sufficient coordination among most leading artificial general intelligence efforts and an effective global regulatory framework, including democratic governments, for a good AGI future. I hope you liked this discussion as much as I did. If you enjoyed my video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.